I never thought I'd end up living with my cousin Jake. But life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. I'm Sarah Mitchell, 23, single mom to a 4-month-old baby girl named Emma. This wasn't how I planned my life to go. Not even close. But here I am, unpacking boxes in Jake's spare bedroom, trying to figure out what comes next. The worst part isn't being a single mom at 23. It's not even the fact that Emma's father walked out the moment things got real. No, the worst part is that every time Jake walks past my door, I remember Paris. 4 years ago, everything changed during that family vacation. I was 19 then, fresh out of high school, and ready to take on the world. Jake was 21, already working at his father's company, and carrying himself with that quiet confidence that made girls stare. I remember stepping off the plane in Paris, jet-lagged and irritable. Jake was waiting at baggage claim, looking different than I remembered. He'd cut his hair shorter, filled out in ways I hadn't noticed before. The French girls noticed too. God, did they notice? It started at the hotel lobby. A group of tourists in short summer dresses giggling whenever he walked past. Then on the streets, at cafes, everywhere we went. Women would stare, flip their hair, find excuses to talk to him. I told myself it didn't bother me. I was his cousin after all. Why should I care? But I did care. I cared more than I wanted to admit. By the third day, I started wearing different clothes. Shorter skirts, lower necklines, things I'd packed but never planned to wear. I caught Jake looking once at the Louvre. I was leaning over to read a plaque beneath a painting. When I straightened up, his eyes snapped away too quickly. Something shifted that day. The air felt different between us. Heavier. That night at the hotel bar changed everything. I'd had a few drinks, probably more than I should have. Jake was at the bar, surrounded by 2 older women who couldn't keep their hands off him. They kept touching his arm, laughing too loud at his jokes. Some guy had been buying me drinks all night. I couldn't even remember his name. All I could focus on was Jake. The way those women looked at him. The way he smiled back. Something inside me snapped. I walked over and pulled him away from them. I don't even remember what I said. Just that I was angry. Angry that he wasn't paying attention to me. He laughed at first, but then his expression changed. "You look good tonight, Sarah," he said softly. Just 5 words. That's all it took. We ended up in my room. I changed into pajamas, trying to act normal. But when Jake kissed me, I didn't push him away. I should have. God knows I should have. But I didn't. That night, we crossed a line we could never uncross. The next morning, we pretended nothing happened. We went back to being cousins. Back to sightseeing and family dinners. But everything had changed. Every look felt loaded. Every accidental touch sparked something dangerous. When we returned home, we buried it. Pushed it down deep where no one could see. I dated other guys. Jake had his share of girlfriends. Life went on. Until I met David. He was charming, successful. Everything I thought I wanted. When I got pregnant, he promised we'd be a family. I believed him. I was such an idiot. The moment things got hard, when the reality of midnight feedings and endless diapers hit, he bailed. Just packed his bags and disappeared. My parents tried to be supportive, but their house was too small, they said. No room for a baby. I knew what they meant. No room for their daughter's mistake. That's when Jake called. He had a spare room in his apartment. Said I could stay as long as I needed. I didn't have many options. So here I am, unpacking boxes while Emma sleeps in her portable crib. Jake's apartment isn't big. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, ground floor. But it's clean and quiet. And Jake doesn't make it weird. He's good with Emma too. Better than I expected. The first time he held her, she stopped crying instantly. Like she knew she could trust him. Sometimes I catch him watching her sleep. Those moments make my heart ache in ways I can't explain. Because Jake isn't just my cousin anymore. He's the man who held me in Paris. the one who made me feel things I shouldn't. And now he's the one helping me piece my life back together. Last night, I found him in the kitchen after Emma finally fell asleep. He was making tea, asked if I wanted some. We sat at his small kitchen table, not talking at first, just existing in the quiet. "You're doing great, you know," he said suddenly. I looked up, caught his eyes in the dim light. "With Emma," he added. "You're a good mom." Something in his voice made my chest tight. I wanted to thank him. For the room. For the kindness. For everything. But the words stuck in my throat. Because sitting there, watching him in the soft kitchen light, all I could think about was Paris. The way his hands felt. The sound of his breath. The weight of secrets we never talked about. "I should get some sleep," I said instead. He nodded, but neither of us moved. The air felt thick, charged with something dangerous. Finally, I stood up. "Good night, Jake." "Night, Sarah." I walked to my room, but I couldn't sleep. Memories of Paris kept floating back. The hotel bar. His kiss. The way everything felt possible in the dark. Now unpacking boxes in his spare room. I wonder if I'm making another mistake. Because the way Jake looks at me sometimes, it's exactly how he looked at me in Paris. And that terrifies me more than anything. Emma starts crying, pulling me from my thoughts. Jake appears in the doorway. "Need help?" he asks. I shake my head, picking up my daughter. But his presence lingers. It always does. And I'm starting to wonder how long I can pretend this doesn't affect me. How long we can both pretend Paris was just a dream. Because living here, seeing him every day, watching him with Emma, it's making all those buried feelings resurface. And I don't know how to stop them. Or if I even want to. That's the scariest part. Not the fact that we're cousins. Not the complicated mess my life has become. But the fact that even after 4 years, one look from Jake still makes my heart race. And now we're living under the same roof. With my baby daughter. Playing at being some kind of family. It's a dangerous game we're playing. One that could destroy everything if we're not careful. But every morning when I wake up to find Jake making coffee, or every evening when he helps with Emma's bedtime routine, I feel myself slipping, falling back into feelings I thought I'd buried years ago. And I can see it in his eyes too. The way he watches me when he thinks I'm not looking. The lingering touches that last just a second too long. We're both trying so hard to be normal, to be family. But Paris changed everything. And now living together, it's getting harder to pretend it didn't. Emma finally settles in my arms, her tiny hand gripping my finger. She's innocent in all this. She deserves better than a mother who can't stop thinking about her cousin. Better than the complicated mess I've made of everything. But when Jake smiles at her, when he holds her like she's the most precious thing in the world, I can't help but wonder what if? What if we weren't cousins? What if Paris hadn't been just a vacation fling? What if? But I can't think like that. I have to focus on Emma, on getting back on my feet, on being the mother she deserves. Even if that means ignoring the way my heart races every time Jake walks into the room. Even if it means pretending Paris never happened. Because some lines aren't meant to be crossed twice. No matter how much we might want to. The first week living with Jake passed in a blur of sleepless nights and awkward mornings. Emma's teething, which means neither of us gets much rest. Last night, I found Jake in the kitchen at 3 a.m., warming a bottle. "I heard her crying," he said simply. Like it was perfectly normal for him to be up in the middle of the night, helping with my daughter. But nothing about this situation is normal. Especially not the way my skin tingled when our fingers brushed as he handed me the bottle. I've started noticing little things about him. The way he runs his hand through his hair when he's tired. How his voice gets softer when he talks to Emma. The slight limp in his walk from an old football injury. Things I shouldn't notice about my cousin. Things I can't stop noticing. Today, I caught him on the phone with someone. A woman, from the way he smiled while talking. Her name is Victoria. I've seen her Instagram comments on his photos. She's beautiful success. Full, exactly the kind of woman Jake should be with. Not his cousin with a baby and too much baggage. But knowing that doesn't stop the jealousy from burning in my chest. She seems nice, I said when he hung up. Jake just shrugged. But I saw the way he avoided my eyes. We've been on a few dates. I nodded, pretending my stomach wasn't twisting into knots. That's great. It's not great. Nothing about this is great. Because every time I see him with Emma, every time he helps without being asked, every time he looks at me like he used to in Paris, I fall a little harder. And I can't. I absolutely cannot fall for Jake again. But last night, something happened that made everything more complicated. Emma was finally asleep, and I was trying to clean up the living room. Jake came in from work, looking tired but smiling when he saw me. "Let me help," he said, reaching for a toy at the same time I did. Our hands touched. Neither of us pulled away. For a moment we just stayed there frozen. His hand warm against mine. Hearts beating too fast. Then Emma made a sound in her sleep, and the spell broke. We jumped apart like teenagers caught doing something wrong. "Sorry," Jake mumbled. But he didn't look sorry. He looked like he wanted to touch me again. And God help me, I wanted him to. That's when I knew I was in trouble. Because this isn't Paris anymore. We're not teenagers on vacation, caught up in the romance of a foreign city. We're adults. Family. And I have a daughter to think about now. But when Jake looks at me like that, all my carefully constructed reasons fall apart. This morning, Victoria showed up unannounced. She brought coffee and bagels, playing the perfect girlfriend. But I saw the way she watched me and Jake. The questions in her eyes. The slight edge to her smile. She's not stupid. She sees something between us, even if she doesn't know what it is. "Your cousin is so good with Emma," she said, emphasis on cousin. I forced a smile. "Yeah, he is. Must be nice, having family to help out." The way she said family made my skin crawl. Because she's right. Jake is family. And what happened in Paris should have stayed in Paris. But now, watching him hold Emma while talking to Victoria, I can't help but remember how it felt to be in his arms. How safe I felt. How right it seemed, even though it was wrong. Jake caught me staring, and quickly looked away. But not before I saw something flash in his eyes. Something that looked a lot like longing. Victoria saw it too. I could tell by the way her smile tightened. The way she moved closer to Jake, marking her territory. After she left, the apartment felt heavy with unspoken words. Jake busied himself with dishes while I fed Emma. We moved around each other carefully, like dancers trying not to step on each other's toes. But the tension remained. It always does. "Sarah," Jake finally said, breaking the silence. I okayed up, heart racing. "We should talk about this." "About what?" Playing dumb was easier than acknowledging the truth. He sighed, running that hand through his hair again. "You know what? I did know. Of course I knew. But talking about it would make it real. And once it was real, we couldn't pretend anymore." "Jake, please." "No, we need to address this." He stepped closer, and I instinctively backed away. We can't keep pretending nothing happened in Paris. It was 4 years ago. But it still affects us. He wasn't wrong. Every interaction, every glance, every accidental touch, it all carried the weight of Paris. "I have Emma to think about now," I whispered. "I know. And you have Victoria." He flinched at her name. "It's not serious." "It should be." "Sarah." "No, Jake. We can't do this." But even as I said the words, I knew they were a lie. Because we were already doing this. Every day we lived together, every moment we shared, we were falling back into something we should have left in Paris. And the scariest part of me didn't want to stop it. Even though I knew we should. Even though I knew it could destroy everything. Because when Jake looks at me, when he holds Emma, it feels like coming home. And that terrifies me more than anything else. Because home shouldn't be your cousin's apartment. Home shouldn't be forbidden glances and hidden feelings. Home shouldn't be Jake. But it is. And I don't know how to change that. Or if I even want to. Emma starts crying again, saving me from having to say more. Jake steps back, the moment broken. But the tension lingers. It always does. And I'm starting to wonder how long we can keep pretending. How long before something breaks. How long before we either have to face this or walk away completely. Because living in this limbo, it's slowly killing us both. And the worst part is, I'm not sure which outcome scares me more. Facing our feelings and risking everything. Or walking away and losing Jake completely. Either way, something has to give. And soon. Because we can't keep dancing around this forever. Paris made sure of that. Victoria showed up again today, this time with a determined look in her eyes. She waited until Jake left for work, then cornered me in the kitchen. "We need to talk about what's going on," she said. I kept my eyes on Emma's bottle, measuring formula with shaking hands. "I don't know what you mean." "I think you do, Sarah." The way she said my name made me look up. Her eyes were hard, but there was something else there. Pain, maybe, or understanding. "The way you look at him," she continued. "The way he looks at you. He's my cousin. Is that all he is?" The question hung in the air between us, heavy with accusation and truth. "Victoria, just tell me one thing," she interrupted. "Did something happen between you two?" My silence was answer enough. She nodded slow. Why, like she'd known all along. "When?" "Paris," I whispered. 4 years ago. "And now?" "Nothing's happened." "But you want it to." I couldn't lie to her. Not when she was looking at me like that. Not when she already knew the truth. It doesn't matter what I want. It matters to Jake. That made me look at her sharply. "What do you mean?" She laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "You really don't see it, do you?" "See what?" "The way he lights up when you enter a room." "Victoria, the way he talks about you and Emma." "Stop. Like you're his family." "We are his family." "Not like that," she said softly. "And you know it." I did know it. That's what made it worse. "I'm not trying to hurt anyone," I whispered. "I believe you." She stood up, straightening her designer jacket. "But you are hurting him." "How?" "By pretending this isn't what it is." She walked to the door, then turned back. "Figure it out, Sarah." "What do you mean?" "Either be with him or let him go." "It's not that simple." "It never is." After she left, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time. Emma slept peacefully in her carrier, unaware of how complicated adult lives could be. When Jake came home that evening, I could tell something was different. "Victoria broke up with me," he said quietly. My heart stopped. "Why?" He looked at me then, really looked at me. "You know why?" And I did. Of course I did. Because the same thing that drove Victoria away was the thing we'd been avoiding for weeks. The thing we'd been avoiding for years. "Jake, don't," he said. "Don't make excuses." "We can't." "Why not?" "Because we're family." That didn't stop us in Paris. We were young then. And now? Now I have Emma to think about. He stepped closer, and I fought the urge to back away. "Emma loves me." "That's not the point." "Then what is the point, Sarah?" His voice was soft, dangerous. "The point is that this is wrong." "Says who?" "Everyone." "I don't care about everyone." He was too close now. I could smell his cologne, feel his warmth. "Jake, please. Tell me you don't feel it too." "I can't." "Can't or won't?" "Both." He reached out, touched my cheek so gently it made my heart ache. "Sarah." That's when Emma started crying. The moment shattered like glass. I stepped back, away from his touch, away from the temptation. "I need to check on her." Jake let me go, but his eyes followed me. I could feel them burning into my back as I walked away. Later that night, after Emma was asleep, I heard him in the kitchen. the soft clink of a glass, the sound of liquid being poured. I should have stayed in my room, should have pretended to be asleep. But I couldn't. I found him sitting at the kitchen table, a half-empty bottle of whiskey in front of him. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked without looking up. "Neither could you, apparently." He gestured to the empty chair across from H.M. I sat down, even though I knew I shouldn't. "Victoria said something interesting today," he said. My heart skipped. "What?" "She said I needed to stop lying to myself." "About what?" He finally looked at me. "About you." The air felt thick, heavy with possibility. "Jake. She's right, you know." "Please don't. I've been lying to myself for 4 years." "We both have." The words slipped out before I could stop them. His eyes met mine, and I saw everything there. The want, the fear, the love. God, the love. "What are we doing, Sarah?" "I don't know." "Yes, you do." And I did. We were falling. Had been falling since Paris. Maybe even before that. "We can't," I whispered. "Why not?" "Because it would change everything. Maybe everything needs to change." He reached across the table, took my hand. I let him. "I'm scared," I admitted. "Me too. What if we ruin everything? What if we don't?" Emma's cry broke through the moment. Again. Maybe it was a sign. I pulled my hand away and stood up. "I should." "Yeah," he said. "You should." But before I left, I turned back. "Jake." "Yeah. I don't know how to stop feeling this way." He smiled, sad and beautiful. "Neither do I." I went to check on Emma, but sleep didn't come easily that night. Because now everything was out in the open. No more pretending. No more hiding. And I had no idea what to do next. Because Jake was right. Maybe everything did need to change. But was I brave enough to let it? The next few days passed in a haze of meaningful glances and careful distance. Jake and I moved around each other like magnets with reverse poles. Always aware. Always pulling. Always resisting. Emma became our buffer, our excuse to keep space between us. But she also brought us together in ways we couldn't avoid. Like tonight, when she wouldn't stop crying. Nothing I did helped. Not feeding, not changing, not rocking. Jake found me in tears, holding my screaming daughter. Without a word, he took her from my arms. "Go take a shower," he said softly. "I've got her." I should have argued. Should have been stronger. But I was so tired. The hot water helped, washing away tears and tension. When I came out, the apartment was quiet. I found them in the living room. Jake asleep on the couch. Emma peaceful on his chest. Both breathing softly in the dim light. Something in my chest cracked open at the sight. Because this looked like family. Like home. Like everything I shouldn't want but desperately did. I must have made a sound, because Jake's eyes opened. "Hey," he whispered, careful not to wake Emma. "Hey." She finally settled down. I can see that. I should have taken her. Should have gone back to my room. Instead, I sat on the edge of the couch. "You're good with her," I said softly. "She makes it easy." His free hand found mine in the darkness. I let him lace our fingers together. Era. Don't. We need to talk about this. I know. But not tonight. Not with Emma sleeping so peacefully between us. Not when everything felt so fragile. The next morning, reality crashed back in. My mom called. "How are things with Jake?" she asked. The guilt hit hard and fast. "Fine. He's such a good cousin, letting you stay there." Cousin. The word felt like acid on my tongue. "Yeah, he is." "Have you started looking for your own place?" I hadn't. I should have. "Not yet." "Sarah." "I know, Mom. You can't stay there forever." "But what if I wanted to? What if the thought of leaving made my chest hurt? What if?" "I have to go, Mom." Emma's crying. She wasn't. But I couldn't handle the conversation anymore. Jake was in the kitchen when I hung up. "Everything okay?" No. Nothing was okay. "My mom thinks I should start looking for my own place." Something flashed across his face. Pain. Fear. Do you want to? Want to what? Leave. The word hung between us, heavy with meaning. I should. That's not what I asked. I looked at him then. Really looked at him. At the man who held my daughter like she was his own. Who made me coffee every morning without asking. Who looked at me like I was everything he wanted. Everything he couldn't have. No, I whispered. I don't want to leave. He stepped closer. Too close. Not close enough. Then don't. Jake. Stay. We can't keep doing this. Doing what? Pretending. Then let's stop pretending. His hand cupped my cheek. Warm. Familiar. Dangerous. What are you saying? You know what I'm saying. I did. God help me, I did. We're cousins. I don't care. Everyone else will. Let them. Jake. I love you. The words hit like a physical force, knocking the air from my lungs, making my heart stop. Start. Race. You can't. Too late. His thumb brushed my cheek, wiping away tears I hadn't realized were falling. I've loved you since Paris. Please don't. Probably before that. We can't. We already are. And then he kissed me. Soft. Sweet. Everything I remembered from Paris. Everything I'd been trying to forget. I kissed him back. For one perfect moment, everything made sense. Then Emma started crying. Reality crashed back in. I pulled away. Stumbled back. I can't. Sarah. This was a mistake. The hurt in his eyes killed me. But I couldn't. I couldn't risk everything. Couldn't destroy our family. Couldn't let Emma grow up with this hanging over her. I'll start looking for apartments tomorrow. Don't do this. We have to. I ran to Emma's room. Picked her up. Held her close. Tried to let her tears drown out the sound of my heart breaking. Because I loved Jake too. Had loved him since Paris. Maybe before. But love wasn't enough. It couldn't be. Not when everything else stood in our way. Not when the cost was so high. So I would leave. Find my own place. Try to forget the way his lips felt against mine. The way he held Emma. The way he looked at me like I was everything. Because that's what good mothers did. They made the hard choices. Protected their children. Even if it meant breaking their own hearts in the process. Even if it meant walking away from the only man they'd ever truly loved. Even if that man was their cousin. Because some lines weren't meant to be crossed. No matter how much we wanted to. No matter how right it felt. No matter how much it hurt to walk away. End.